Welcome to Foreign Dispatches on Channels Television, where we bring you stories of interest and events that happened during the week. I'm Anne Nwawodo. Just last week, we told you about Britain's decision to ban tech giant Huawei. Well, earlier this week, the United States took its own decision, insisting that Chinese firms like Huawei must complete requirements under the Phase 1 trade deal and stop the unfair treatment on Americans.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo departed for a visit to Britain and Denmark earlier this week, with China and Huawei expected to be on the agenda. Mr. Pompeo took fresh aim at China last week, saying the United States would impose visa restrictions on Chinese firms like Huawei Technologies Co. Limited that he accused of facilitating human rights violations. According to Mr. Pompeo, Washington remained hopeful China would complete its requirements under Phase 1 of a trade deal it reached with U.S. President Donald Trump in January, and that changes will be seen in the behavior across the entire spectrum where they have unfairly treated America for far too long. U.S.-China ties are at the lowest ebb in decades, with relations strained over the global coronavirus pandemic, China's military build-up in the South China Sea, its treatment of Uyghur Muslims, and Beijing's massive trade surpluses.
It wasn't an easy journey for the European Union when members began the process of decision-making on recovery packages for countries to manage the COVID-19 pandemic at the European Special Summit.
Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki has accused the Netherlands, Denmark, Sweden and Austria, called the frugal states, in talks on the EU post-COVID recovery package of being stingy and egoistic.
It is a certain amount, forced by a group of stingy, egoistic states which look at things very narrowly through the prism of their own interests. An amount for further negotiations, because that's how we should call our night talks, a previous phase of talks which we ended before 6 a.m. Now, tentatively, there is on the table the sum of 390 billion euros in grants.
Speaking on Polish television just before negotiations were to resume on the fourth day of the summit, Prime Minister Morawiecki commented on the latest proposal from the chairman of the talks, Charles Michel, to reduce the amount of grants in the package.
So we are talking a lot about rebates. The question of budget rebates is already something a bit problematic and difficult to accept. But to find a compromise, we might have to say yes to them. But accepting rebates on values and to have a Europe with cut-rate values, rights and respect for rule of law, that will be a no from our part.
Poland is likely to be one of the top beneficiaries of the recovery package, receiving tens of billions of euros in grants and cheap loans, even though it is one of the countries least affected by the coronavirus pandemic. The European Parliament said it would withhold support for any deal struck by EU governments on the bloc's huge coronavirus stimulus package if it fails to meet certain conditions.
Negotiations and decision-making surprisingly entered a fourth day as EU members hope for a good outcome to provide stimulus packages and cushion the effect of COVID-19 on their economies.
The European Union Special Summit, which aims to decide on the next 7-year budget and a massive recovery fund, dragged into the fourth day early on Monday, with disputes over core issues still unresolved. European Council President Charles Michel resumed the plenary at dawn after a prolonged midnight break, but only to announce it would reconvene in the afternoon. The heads of state and government of the EU member states, in their first physical meeting since the COVID-19 outbreak in Europe, seemed resolved to reach a deal despite the arduous negotiations for 3 days and nights. The summit, which kicked off Friday last week, had been scheduled to end on Saturday. Officials said the discussion was headed in the right direction as the leaders were seeking consensus on proposals to authorize the European Commission to borrow 750 billion euros, about 857 billion US dollars, and give the money as grants and loans to the pandemic-hit member states. The most difficult issue was rebates, a term referring to the compensation offered to some wealthy countries, including the Netherlands, Sweden, Denmark and Austria, which claim to have made excessive contributions to the EU budget, even if based on objective economic criteria. Earlier in the day, Austrian Chancellor Sebastian Kurz said that despite some progress, there was still a long way to go to reach an agreement. Besides, the overall size of fund and the ratio of grants versus loans were also points of contention.
Now, during that summit, European leaders, including French President Emmanuel Macron, the European Council President, and the French Finance Minister were optimistic about the EU recovery plan.
Meanwhile, during the summit, French President Emmanuel Macron said he was hopeful a compromise could be reached over a European Union recovery plan. Mr. Macron also said that talks had advanced in the EU summit.
Bonjour, nous allons donc aborder notre...
There were very tense moments that will likely still be difficult. But on this topic, things have moved forward, and we must now get into the details of the new proposal. It has to be a compromise proposal, where each and another moves forward, but it must maintain ambition for our great European politics for the future, particularly regarding climate, sovereignty, digital, and the future of our youth, and ambition for the recovery plan. It is the condition to our solidarity, to the stability of the European Union and the Eurozone. I am starting today with a lot of determination and will to make progress with our colleagues and again to share this European ambition we need. I am saying this with a lot of strength. Lacking a spirit of compromise and ambition today would mean taking the risk of coming back at more difficult moments, and for some who are worried about this, that in the end it costs us more.
Ne pas aujourd'hui être au rendez-vous de l'esprit de compromis et de l'ambition.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel said extraordinary situations also require extraordinary efforts and hoped the remaining issues to close a deal will be solved soon.
Yesterday night, after long negotiations, we found a way to find a possible agreement. That is a step forward, and we're hopeful that we can reach an agreement today, or that an agreement is possible. It's obvious that these were very difficult negotiations and that they will go on today, but extraordinary situations also require extraordinary efforts. Some issues have been solved so far, and I hope those that are not easy to solve move in the same way and can be solved as well.
After 3 days of haggling over a plan to revive economies throttled by the COVID-19 pandemic, European Council President is expected to put forward a new basis for a deal to bridge the competing demands of North and Southern Europe. French Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire said on Monday, July 20, an agreement on a recovery plan at the European Council meeting in Brussels was possible and a necessity.
An agreement is possible. An agreement is necessary. I want to salute the efforts made by the President Emmanuel Macron and the Chancellor Angela Merkel. Obviously, I am following the negotiations as closely as you might imagine. The President and the Chancellor are fighting non-stop to make people understand the stakes in these negotiations. What's at stake in the negotiations taking place today in Brussels is the presence, or not, of Europe among the big world powers in the 21st century. With China and the United States, will there still be Europe, yes or no?
EU leaders stood on an impasse on Monday after 3 days of haggling over a plan to revive economies throttled by the COVID-19 pandemic. The European Council President said on Monday, July 20, he was convinced EU leaders meeting for the 4th day would reach an agreement on an economic recovery package to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. Charles Michel, who chairs EU member state summit, said he would soon present his new proposal on a coronavirus stimulus plan to the European Union leaders.
Good evening. I will soon send to all the leaders my new proposal. This proposal is the fruit of a very intense collective work. We know this negotiation is extremely difficult. We really take stock of the fact that what's at stake in this negotiation is to make sure we are united. United to make sure that Europe is up to the challenge we are confronted with.
He added he was convinced that an agreement was possible.
I am going to send my new proposal to all the leaders. We have worked very hard, and this proposal is the fruit of a lot of collective work with all the leaders and with their teams. I know that the last steps are always the most difficult, but I am confident. I think that even if it's difficult, even if it will be important to continue to work, I think and I am convinced that an agreement is possible. Thank you.
As they were arriving for a fourth day of meeting, leaders said earlier they were cautiously optimistic that agreement on a massive stimulus plan for their coronavirus-blighted economies was within reach. But tensions between them remained high after days of summit squabbling.
Well, after days of negotiations, a deal was finally reached. A recovery package deal was agreed on, and as expected, the EU leaders expressed joy over the decision, with some of them even describing it as the birth of a new Europe.
European Union leaders reached a deal on Tuesday, July 21 morning on a post-pandemic recovery package for the economy of the 27-nation bloc, offering 750 billion euros in grants and loans to counter the effect of the COVID-19-induced recession, officials said. Diplomats said the leaders appeared to have put aside the rancor that stood in the way of a compromise over hours of haggling through the weekend, and one said they were on the home stretch. The European Union's hard-won deal on a massive recovery plan for its coronavirus-hit economies showed that its 27 nations could stand together with a common belief in their future. That's according to the European Council President Charles Michel, who proposed that within the 750 billion euro recovery fund, 390 billion should be non-repayable grants, down from 500 billion originally proposed, and the rest in repayable loans.
This is a good deal, this is a strong deal, and most importantly, this is the right deal for Europe right now. I would like to thank all the leaders and the President of the Commission and their teams for their hard work. We showed collective responsibility and solidarity, and we show also our belief in our common future. And this agreement sends a concrete signal that Europe is a force for action.
We negotiated for 4 long days and nights, more than 90 hours, but it was all worth it. This agreement is a signal of our ability to act in Europe. Europe still has the courage and imagination to think big. And as exhausted as we all are, we are aware that this is a historic moment in Europe. We are in one of the most serious economic and health crises, and yet, after intense struggles, Europe manages to respond to this unprecedented crisis with strength.
French Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire has described the deal as the birth of a new Europe. Le Maire said the deal would result in a Europe with greater solidarity among member nations, more environmentally friendly policies, and a stronger Franco-German relationship at its core.
You're still watching Foreign Dispatches on Channels Television. We begin the second part of the program with some good news. Progress has been made in terms of research into vaccines to counter coronavirus. Take a look.
The World Health Organization on Monday, July 20th, welcomed progress on research into vaccines to counter COVID-19, but warned there was still much work to be done. Mike Ryan, head of the WHO Emergencies Program, welcomed news that AstraZeneca's experimental vaccine developed with Britain's Oxford University, was safe and produced an immune response in early-stage clinical trials in healthy volunteers.
Thanks. No, I think it is good news. I mean, effectively we have 23 COVID-19 candidate vaccines in clinical development, and as of today we add one candidate vaccine for which phase 1 clinical data is available. So we have 3 which is available in peer-reviewed journals, plus we have one other, the BioNTech Pfizer product, which the data is available on pre-publication. So it's great, first of all, to see the data coming through into peer-reviewed journals. I think the data is very new. We do welcome the study and congratulate our colleagues at the Oxford University's Jenner Institute and the Oxford Vaccine Group, and obviously our colleagues at AstraZeneca for getting this data out there. Again, this vaccine was given to 1,000 healthy adults between the ages of 18 and 55, and certainly did not appear to have any serious adverse events other than the expected, in some cases, chills, muscle aches, headaches. And the vaccine did generate neutralizing antibody, I think, in all participants, and in a very small number of participants that were given a booster dose, those responses were even greater. So in generating T-cell mediated responses and generating neutralizing antibody, this is a positive result. But again, there is a long way to go. These are phase 1 studies. We now need to move into larger scale real-world trials, but it is good to see more data and more products moving into this very important phase of vaccine discovery, and we congratulate our colleagues for the progress they have made.
Ryan told a media briefing in Geneva that there were 23 potential vaccines in development, with 3 making data available for examination by other scientists in peer reviews. U.S. drug maker Pfizer and German biotech firm BioNTech also provided additional promising data. WHO Director General says lives must be saved now.
With strong leadership, community engagement, and a comprehensive strategy to suppress transmission and save lives, COVID-19 can be stopped. We do not have to wait for a vaccine. We have to save lives now. Make no mistake, we must continue to accelerate vaccine research while doing more with the tools we have at hand.
Global infections stand at more than 14.5 million, according to a Reuters tally, with more than 600,000 deaths.
Meanwhile, human trials of COVID-19 vaccine have shown positive signs as University of Oxford researchers say the vaccine is safe and effective in producing an immune response. With over 1,000 participants in the trial, the vaccines might be made available before the end of this year.
The first human trial of the coronavirus vaccine has shown positive signs, as researchers believe the only way out of the pandemic is by creating vaccines.
So we've now seen exactly the sort of immune responses that we hoped to see, but we now need to do the rigorous studies to show that the vaccine is protective against the virus in humans. So vaccines are absolutely the way out of the pandemic, and this is a really important moment because it shows that we can make the robust immune responses which we hope will relate to protection in the future.
We know there's an immune response to the vaccine, and it's the kind of immune response we're looking for. We don't know how big that immune response needs to be. And it may be that quite a low-level immune response could completely protect against coronavirus vaccine, and that's going to mean that it's very easy to develop a vaccine against it. But it may mean that we have to have a really strong response against coronavirus, and we have to give more than one dose, and those have to be large doses of the vaccine to get that very strong response. So that's why we don't know how much we need to do yet to see if the vaccine will protect people.
Really, we're still waiting for the critical piece of information is, does it actually prevent disease? And in the clinical trials, we have 2 groups of individuals. One group who receive this new vaccine, and the other group, half of the volunteers, who receive a control vaccine that has no protection against coronavirus. And what we now need to find out is whether the group who have the coronavirus vaccine are protected and they don't get disease. And that needs time for those cases to accumulate within the clinical trial to give us confidence, statistically speaking, about whether the vaccine works.
If we can get an effective vaccine, we will be able to vaccinate very large numbers of people because we can manufacture this vaccine at scale. And that will allow people to get back to normal life, hopefully, after they are vaccinated, so that people come out of lockdown, don't need to wear masks, and economic activity can be restored back to hopefully near normal levels. So it's now realistic, and AstraZeneca have announced this, that as many as 2 billion doses of vaccine might be produced.
COVID-19 has, of course, affected over 14 million people around the world. Many countries are finding it very difficult to handle rising cases. Peru is one of such, as COVID-19 patients camped outside hospitals while receiving treatment.
Patients set up tents outside the hospital in Peru's city of Arequipa amid reports that the pandemic is sweeping into the country's southern region.
Somebody do something for us. You're all witnessing the decline that we're in. It is terrible.
As restrictions in the Lima area ease up, the virus is now ravaging other areas outside of the capital. Health workers say they lack the resources to tackle the increasing number of infections.
In the last 4 or 5 days, there has been a dramatic increase in the loss of life. Over the last few days, there has been an increase, averaging nearly 20 deaths per day.
Video obtained by news media shows oxygen tanks set up near cars parked outside with coronavirus patients hooked up as they sit inside their vehicles. Peru has reported that total cases nationally topped 353,000, putting the Andean nation fifth globally. More than 13,100 people have died so far. President Martin Vizcarra headed to Arequipa on Sunday to visit a new hospital wing for coronavirus patients, where he was met with protesting medics calling for greater equipment to face the pandemic.
We know that this is a very complex virus. Some regions have had relative calm with the pandemic for a period of time, but there has been an increase in infections that has required an improvement in the response to the virus.
18-year-old Sumaya Faruqi and 6 other teammates of Afghan girls' robotics team are finding ways to help hospitals tackle the pandemic by building a prototype ventilator to help patients breathe better. The young girls hope that this will solve ventilator shortages in Afghanistan. Check it out.
A team of high school girls in Afghanistan's western city of Herat has built a prototype ventilator that they hope will be used in hospitals to help COVID-19 patients breathe easier amidst the ongoing pandemic.
In the last 3 years, we have done a lot of work and activities in the fields of agriculture, industry and security. For example, some time ago, we made a minesweeper robot, but so far we have not done anything in the field of medical devices, and I'm so delighted that we have this opportunity to make a piece of medical equipment.
According to Afghanistan's health ministry, the country currently only has around 800 ventilators in total, all imported from abroad.
This ventilator will be our national pride. The maintenance of this device will be done inside the country, and this device will save us from relying on foreign countries, and we will achieve self-sufficiency in this sector.
As schools in Herat have remained shut since April due to lockdown measures taken to prevent the spread of coronavirus, Faruqi and her teammates were afforded extra time to work on the project. They had extra help from experts at institutions such as Harvard University. The project was funded and facilitated by the Digital Citizen Fund, a non-profit organization which has founded several digital literacy projects across Afghanistan.
And that's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to keep up with our top stories. You can do it on channelstv.com. I'll definitely see you again next time. Please stay safe. I'm Anne Nwawadu. Thanks for watching.